Well, welcome to the StudioPTBO podcast. We are back, and we have a guest today, the man, the legend, Tyler Babin. This is super exciting. Man, yeah, like, we really appreciate allowing us to travel up to Toronto and, kind of pick your brain on creativity, on producing content, just philosophy, all that good stuff, man. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I thought you were introing me there, partner. But the legend, Neil.
the legend.
Babin trumped me today.
The legend. I like that. I have to update LinkedIn as soon as we're done with this.
Yeah. Hashtag legend.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Babin. This is you've had an incredible journey thus far, and you're only 25 years old and just getting started. But like you've had this wealth of experience in your life already, working for VaynerMedia and being alongside Gary all over the world and his journey and how he's inspiring people, and you've been documenting that process. What's it like? What's it been like for you? Did you ever pinch yourself, or are you past that stage, or it must be surreal for you?
I'm fully convinced I'm gonna wake up any moment now. That this is just like one big dream. We were talking before we started recording, and I was on the phone with my mom, on my flight right before coming to Toronto, and she asked, like, did you ever think it was going to be this big? And I was like, I just kind of chuckled, and I was like, no, like, there was no shot. And like, as big as I could have dreamt it at 18, that I would be able to do any of the things I'm doing these days. So it's super surreal. And it's just been like an experience. I mean, there's no words to even, I'm just so grateful that this is even a way for me to make a living.
And you grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, and you thought you might stay there forever, like a lot of people stay where they are forever. And did you know early on that you had aspirations to get out of Tallahassee? I can't even say it. It's
Tallahassee. It's like proper Southern.
There's no beach there, right?
No, there's no beach there. So I always say I grew up in Florida, and people are like, awesome, Miami, it's great.
Grew up in Florida.
But no, like Tallahassee is basically just a swamp and like forest. So it's not the best part of Florida, but it holds a special place in my heart. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's a really tough place to escape from, like the hometown vibes of just being stuck somewhere. And I always had aspirations, and I always in my heart knew that I was like a city kid. I did my first trip to New York City when I was in 8th grade, and I was like, this is the spot. This feels right.
You knew that young, eh?
Yeah, I knew. Yeah. It was just, I mean, and it was even the first day when I actually finally did move to New York, coming from a kid who had spent his entire life in a pretty small town, very sheltered. I like hopped off the plane and was just like straight walking. It's like where I feel most at home is in that chaos.
Straight to Times Square?
I made a quick pass through Times Square, and then and now I've like avoided it at all costs. But yeah, I always knew that I had to do something bigger.
Awesome, man.
Now, you recently jumped on a plane to Toronto just randomly. It's kind of like, you posted something on Instagram. I was like, man, like, I would love to have you on the podcast. And like, what kind of sparked, I guess, the need, like, you wrote a post recently about, almost having like a creative writing block, kind of like, figuring out, what you want to post, maybe like take us into a little bit of like what's going through your head right now in regards to content creation.
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea of sort of spontaneously jumping on a flight is, I think that breaking patterns just allow you to unlock certain things. And so even if I come here and it's not as much about like doing a ton of shoots and exploring, just being in a place that I'm not familiar with and, experiencing new people and those interactions, like maybe they'll like let things connect a little bit better. So that's always my philosophy. I'm just trying to do like spontaneous trips whenever I have the time. Awesome. But yeah, man, it's interesting getting to a place now where I feel like I'm starting to gain some traction. Like I have a decent audience around me, and like we're really developing a cool community where I have a relationship with a lot of these people I'm talking to online. And I just really want to be delicate with what I'm putting out there. I'm really, really into this idea of like authenticity in social, because I think everything is so fabricated right now.
100%.
And I think that it's leading to a lot of issues in like mental health and things like that with like the next generation of creators coming up. So I'm trying to figure out who I want to be, in that I really want to make it cool to be yourself and for kids to admit like that they had bad days. Yep. On the flip side, I still want to be able to like have a cool influencer life. Of course I do. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so finding that balance of, yes, like I'm able to travel and do a lot of cool stuff, but I'm also, I think, a nice guy, and I just want to make it a more open, inviting world for us to live in.
And you
that's
really
where I'm trying to
engage
click.
with people on social, like on Instagram and DMing and Facebook. And what are you finding you're trying to learn about people? Is it, I mean, it's not so much, or is it networking? Is it just finding peeps that can inspire you in some way? Or what do you find? What do you learn from people? And you're meeting people all over the world. Are you drawn to a certain type of person, or?
I want to meet everyone. There's definitely not like a certain person that I'm, particularly drawn to. In terms of engaging in social, it's a few things. I think to me, I'm still in my mind like the little kid who lives in Florida. And so the thought that there's people online who are even interested in talking with me or like wanting advice or things like that, it's so humbling. I'm like, I'll talk to you all day long. Yeah. So I really, really try to over engage. And again, just going back to authenticity and social, right? Like I think the idea of having 1,000 followers and those 1,000 people's names and birthdays is way more interesting than having 100,000 followers that you don't know and don't care about you that much.
Yep, totally.
Right. So it's quality, not necessarily
it's
quantity.
Depth over width.
And you're not hyper focused on that either.
Yeah.
Like building up, like getting up to 50, 100,000. That's not your game. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it'll happen, and it'll happen when it's natural. I just want to make sure I'm doing it in the right way. Totally. I think I could adjust how I'm treating social and like easily reach those numbers. I just want it to be a really quality audience.
Yeah. And do you learn that from being around Gary and the team, or is it something you figured out? Because he always is hyper, about being self-aware and having perspective on life and being grounded and staying humble, which he seems to be. I mean, he seems so authentic. Have you learned a lot from him, or are you figuring it out on your own too on the journey?
I think on some level it's a mix of both, but I think I would be super ignorant to not give Gary an immense amount of credit for the type of person I've become at this point. And his thing isn't as much that I'm necessarily following his teachings like by the book. Right. It's just that he encourages you to figure out who you truly are and to like peel back those layers of bullshit. Yeah. And figure out like what you actually want to leave in the world. Right.
Exactly. That's cool, man. And you've delved a lot more than just documenting, and Cody's going to get into that with you later about videos. But for me, what interests me too is, you're kind of squirrely. You like to dabble in different areas, right? Yeah. And so Babin did this book cover, which is amazing. I think it obviously sold well, but it pops. And tell me about the thinking that went into the design of this, and how you felt that it really resonated with people, and how many incarnations it might have gone through.
Yeah. So for one, the Crushing It cover might be one of my like proudest things. Not even because I think it's necessarily the most hyper well designed thing. Like I think it's funny looking at it now, like it has problems. And when you make something, you look back at it 6 months later, you're 100%. Like, I would have done everything different.
Babin, don't overthink it.
But that being said, I got a text message from Gary at like 10 o'clock at night one night, and he said, "Do you want to design Crushing It?" And I said yes. Wow. And to open up Photoshop that night and start dropping shapes in and like building something out, and then to like hold it was the first time I had ever experienced that. And it was just, I don't know, it was like tough to like actually explain that feeling of like getting a box and like opening it up and there was all these books.
What went through your mind as you when Gary said to you like, "I want you to design this"? What was going through your head in the sense of like, the design, like when you were putting essentially pen to paper and you were designing and opening up Photoshop and figuring out how to design this? Like, what was going through your head as a content creator?
So the biggest thing I wanted was to design something that was very in the moment of like current social media, just based off like the subject matter of the book. And I wanted it to be something that stood in a block of time. Mm-hmm. So that's why like Instagram stories had just came out really whenever I was starting to design it. And so I put the Instagram story, like not knowing if Instagram stories was going to win or not. But I thought, okay,
IGTV or Instagram
it was this. And then like we went with the platforms that we thought mattered the most in the moment. And these platforms could be, Snapchat has basically died at this point. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like these platforms only existed like in this moment. Yeah. And I think the thing Gary kind of says is he doesn't necessarily want to make timeless books. Like he wants to make books that are very impactful in the moment. So you take the info, you apply it, and you see a result. So that was our thing, is I wanted to make it something that was just very, there's tons of like little hidden things. And then also to throw back some stuff to the original Crush It. So the words that are low opacity back here is the opening page.
Interesting.
Crush
So
It.
it was an
okay.
ode to
In
the
the back.
past,
Yeah,
too.
so
to
it's an
what-
ode to
That's
the
awesome. I
previous-
didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
wicked.
What made you choose the color yellow?
I wanted something that just popped and was like a thumb stopper. So the color is, funny enough, matched very closely to the Amazon yellow. I wanted something that if you were, I actually walked through like a Barnes & Noble that's not too far from our office and was just like looked at what jumped out at me the most. And I wanted to make something that was just super, super yellow.
That's awesome.
Cool. So you are inspired by just walking around and observing, whether it's in a magazine stand or a neighborhood, or you're really your creativity comes from many different avenues, right?
Yeah, all over the place. I will always, anything that like, if I'm just walking down the street and if something grabs my attention, I really try to analyze why it grabbed my attention. Was it shape? Was it color? Like, I think all those things I want to take and try and implement into my own design work.
Cool.
Totally.
And Babin also had a hand in designing Gary's awesome sneakers, which I have, the Cloud Dirt sneakers.
Yeah.
Correct?
Clouds and Dirt.
And so that was a sensation too, and it really helped rebrand K-Swiss in the modern era. And Gary took a real chance on that, and K-Swiss took a chance on him, and it really worked. But so walk us through that. Like, did you actually design the Cloud Dirt on the soles of the sneakers, or?
So I worked very closely in collaboration with some of the designers at K-Swiss because I had never made a shoe before and really had no idea where to start with that. So I came up with sort of the ideas and direction very closely also with Gary's assistant, who's also named Tyler Schmidt. He had a big hand in them, and we just sort of bounced back and forth off each other. My favorite story of the Clouds and Dirt was Gary and I were at Complex Con with Barney, who was the president of K-Swiss. And my first idea is I wanted to do a limited run. We were in Complex Con, and everything's very, very hype focused and like limited. My goal was to fill up the shoe boxes with dirt and wrap the sneakers in plastic.
Love it.
Inside.
You actually did it, or?
We didn't do it based off shipping costs.
Yeah.
It like went
Fair enough.
skyrocketing.
Shipping costs would have been through the roof.
What a brilliant idea, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I remember it was funny. Tyler and I were on a call and we were chatting about like overall themes, and we knew we wanted one shoe, each shoe to sort of stand for its own thing. And I think Clouds and Dirt was probably the first idea that was thrown into the ring, and that's the one we decided to push forward with. And so I think front to back, maybe it took about 2 months of sort of concepting the design and like figuring out the direction we wanted to go. And then
25-year-old Babin has already designed a book, a best-selling book, and sneakers. Like, talk about pinching yourself. And he's now on, so Gary's launched a new wine label called Empathy Wines. Launched, I guess, 3 months ago or 3 or 4 months ago. I'm not sure, but
it launched 3 months ago. We've been working on it for 2 years. So
Right.
It's been under wraps.
okay.
Yeah.
And so Babin is now a big part of that, a team of a lean team of 3 people. And are you sort of like the creative director of that?
In a sense,
Yeah.
I'm sort of taking on those
Yeah.
sort of roles and responsibilities.
So what does that look like? The branding on the wine bottles, packaging, everything?
So I guess the long tail answer is Gary and his 2 business partners, Nate and Trouty, had come up with this idea of starting a wine about 18 months, maybe 2 years ago. And initial ideas started coming together, and finally they were like, yeah, we're going to do it. So we packed up and went on a trip to Napa Valley and started
I
meeting
saw
with
that.
farmers.
I saw that
and
Daily Vee.
Gary in a
I think.
friggin'
Yeah.
he had
It
like
was-
a cowboy hat on.
It was crazy. And that was the second trip. The first trip was like literally Gary, the 2 business partners, myself, and D-Rock, and we just went and we started driving to different vineyards and meeting farmers and started figuring out if this was actually a feasible idea. And by the end of it, we had decided we were going to do a winery.
Because you'd had a few glasses of wine.
Yeah, there was a lot of wine consumed on that trip.
Yeah, totally.
Also, the footage all gets very, very shaky towards the end.
Just like
D-Rock and I are like
Babin's like,
high-fiving.
I love it.
Now, the name speaks to Gary's ethos of empathy, deploying that, and he's trying to get that around the world right now. And so how do you play that into a wine? How do you, it seems like a disconnect at some level, wine and empathy. I don't know, but how do you, is it?
I mean, I think it's less a connection directly between wine and empathy, and it's still so early, so there's only so many like hidden things I can talk about.
Okay.
But I mean, Gary's mission in the world is to make kindness cool, and kindness is empathy, right? And so, what an interesting word to slap onto a product.
100%. It's reverse engineering how you'd approach naming something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you're doing a lot of content creation for Gary, and Gary talks a lot about documenting. So how do you as a creator, kind of like take the advice that he says about, document your journey, tell your story, that portion, and like a creator who's, constant, like myself, constantly thinking about different ways to get different shots and like, do things differently. Yeah. How do you like go in between that documenting to the creation?
Welcome to the thing that keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
It's a weird balance because at my core, I'm a creator, right? Like I love the idea of writing out scripts and building the story and doing all those things. And it honestly took me a long time to shift my mindset into more of a documentary thought process. And it's cool. It kind of gives me both sides as long as I can recognize the line as to when I should be documenting and when I should be creating, because that line blurred for me for a very long time. And I was making work that was kind of in the middle. And I think that documenting versus creating, there's room for both of them, but they kind of have to be on their extremes. Like the crossover gets blurry to me, at least.
Cool. And in terms of speaking documenting, do you someday hope to do a long form like documentaries on your own, or like, I mean, you must have. It seems like just knowing you in the last half an hour that you have a whole bucket list of things you want to accomplish with your life, and you're in your infancy. But is one of the things you'd like to delve even deeper into, like the creative part and doing a documentary at some point, like editorials?
Or is it like is it more script based, like? Like script-based movies, like, like is it documentary or is it like...
Is Babin gonna have a show on Netflix?
Yeah.
So it's going to be documentary, but far more planned out than what a traditional documentary, because I actually, nothing about like traditional cinema and like making movies and going that far interests me at all. I'm definitely way more YouTube, Netflix based. And so I love to like kind of draw a box around me, but it's a loose box.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like when it comes to content creation, like like I guess what is the most valuable lesson that you've learned as a content creator that you could potentially give to people that are looking to start out, like they're looking to start a YouTube channel, they're looking to you're even a business owner that's looking to tell their story online, like what would you say would be the best piece of advice you could give them?
My thing is, look, I can tell you to like practice your craft as much as anyone else. And yes, I think that you have to have that skill set and like learning and become the benchmark of quality is so high, and also being created at such a low level. I mean, I don't know, like I run around with that camera all day and like I can make it look like a movie if I want to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
It's great, but you have to make sure you're executing at high levels. It's two things. One, really making sure you're doing it for the right reason.
Okay.
So my thing is that right now it's really cool to be a photographer or a vlogger or a videographer, right? It's having a moment.
Yeah.
My thing is that if Instagram goes away tomorrow, I have a weird feeling a lot of people don't want to be photographers anymore.
That's interesting.
And so I think that if you're creating and stuff, you have to do it because you actually genuinely love what you're making, not because you like the vanity metrics that come with it.
Right.
Also, that being said, it's going to take way longer than what you think. Like, yeah, I'm 25 and sure, on paper I'm young. I started making videos when I was 8.
Right.
I've done this for my entire life.
Yeah.
And I'm just now starting to feel like something's grabbing. So it's patience more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's like I always try to like navigate that word because I don't want to make it too much of a Gary thing, but just understanding that it's going to take a really, really long time for things to happen.
And so you're not in a rush. I mean, you are a bit, I mean, you have a game plan, but you are playing, as Gary would say, the long game a bit too.
Yeah.
You're enjoying the moment, the micro moments in the weeds like these kind of moments, but you have a macro, like long game, the journey.
There's so much I want to do and so I want to make such a big impact on the world, but on some level, like I've already won.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I'm cool. Like if it all ends tomorrow, dope.
Yeah.
I made
dude, you have one name now.
What does an impact look like though? Like so many people say like I want to make an impact in the world. What does that tactically look like for you? And what does an impact look like? Helping content creators. Like what like practically what does impact look like to you?
I just want to make it cool to be yourself.
Yeah,
that's all I want. Like I don't think that you should have to go rent a Mercedes on the weekend and take pictures in front of it to like feel like you're that you matter. You know what I mean? Like I want to just show that it's okay to show what your truth is and to talk about like having bad days. And look, I think so much great stuff comes from the Instagram influencer world right now when everyone's like pushing positivity and all that stuff. But I just want to make it okay to be like, you know what, yesterday sucked.
Yeah.
And like I didn't have good ideas, and like the edit didn't come out right, and now I'm pissed off, and today I'm putting way too much pressure on myself, and I just want to say it's real because it's what I go through. Like,
right.
Not every day is great.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that ignoring that isn't doing any good for the next generation of creators coming up.
Yeah, and you do delve into the mental health part sometimes, and Gary does too, and talking about entrepreneurship and how you have real peaks and valleys and highs and lows and rock bottoms. And do you find that the more you talk about that and colleagues talk about the mental health part like Gary does, that it really does liberate people to be more open and honest and transparent about?
I think so, and I hope so.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I sometimes I don't feel like I have a choice. I have to talk about what I'm going through and like the highs and lows, because if even one person is affected by it and like feels better about themselves or whether creating or anything, cool. Like I did my job.
Yeah, you're giving them hope. Tell us about the movement that Gary's trying to create, and I know you're not a spokesperson, but you're around him all the time. This movement of kindness and actually being a good person, and it's cool to be a good person. I think it's working. Like. Certainly my daughter's generation's paying attention to it. Multiple generations are paying. He's hacking attention of a lot of generations, even boomers. So are you seeing that yourself? Do you feel it, or are you too close to it? What's happening?
In a lot of ways, I'm way too close to it. I'm in like such a bubble in our little world. But I am recognizing it, and it's whenever I go out and I talk to people or am meeting them at our events, or like yesterday I spent a bunch of time FaceTiming with different followers, like hearing them tell me that they're feeling that impact is what makes me like sort of come full circle. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like we can still keep pushing down this road. It's working.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's good. So like you know, you're doing everything with Empathy Wines now, and that's kind of like, you're really doing the creative stuff there. Like, what does that look like for you from a creative outlet? Like, are you going to try different things, or like maybe can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek on like what to expect?
Yeah. So the cool thing about Empathy right now is that it's so much in its infancy in like terms of coming out on social, that we have so much creative freedom to experiment. It's such a lean team, and I'm just like having fun with it. So like I can talk about my next like couple weeks. I basically want to recreate all of the pranks Jim and Dwight do on The Office, but recreate them using Empathy Wine. So like I'm gonna put Empathy Wine in a bowl of Jello and like hide that in someone's desk and just see what happens.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
I just want to build out these like characters essentially in the content of Empathy, so it feels more like a lifestyle brand.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's clever.
And where do these ideas come like from? Like, is it just like, like you're just sitting somewhere, or you're on the flight, like traveling somewhere? Like, where do you get your inspiration from?
Sometimes they just randomly will like pop into my head. The thing I've noticed recently I'm doing is actually stepping away from a computer altogether, like putting on music and like sitting there with a notebook and just think and just like let my mind go in weird avenues. And that's where ideas usually will kind of start to populate.
Good stuff.
And then I'll just refine them.
Totally.
As I'm sort of in my walks to and from the office and things like that.
I love it, man. The more time away from the screen sometimes is the more cathartic, liberating, where you find your creativity. I'm really,
and sorry to cut you off, but it's something I'm actually have tried to really push creators to lately, is I used to have a really bad habit of, okay, I need to post something today. I sit down, open up my laptop, and just start like plugging away at things. Yeah. And I think it's a really bad route to go. Okay. I think that it's way better to like not open up a computer, think for 20 minutes, come up with some sort of like general idea, and then start attacking.
That's super practical
instead of finding the inspiration through the process of like making something. I just think it'll always be better if you attack it with an idea in mind.
It's much more thoughtful. I want to talk about branding in this age we're in right now. And Cody and I meet with a lot of clients and individuals, and Gary talks about all the time that you as a person, more than ever in this era, are a brand. Like Babin is a brand. You are now a brand. People are attracted to you. Influencers, businesses that want to work with you, people that want to collab with you. What does that mean, and how do you draw a line between your personal life and being a brand? Because it's easier than ever now to build your brand, but in some respects you can lose yourself in that a bit, right?
Yeah. It's a fine line, and it all depends on sort of who you want to be portrayed as to the world. I don't talk about a ton of my personal life on social media. Like a lot of my close friends and stuff are more in the dark, and I'm very much just building my own thing. That being said, I don't like that. I don't like that I'm scared to share my personal life sometimes. And I'm always like, all right, people came to this page for a specific reason. They want to see this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. So I don't know. I don't know if I have the right answer, right? Like, I don't know how to not lose yourself in your brand.
Do you see yourself as a brand? Is that how you approach like your Instagram now? Has that changed over the last few years?
It's definitely way more a brand now than what I expected it to be, and what I thought it was like a year and a half ago.
Right.
Now, the content I'm putting up on my own platforms is far more curated, and it's thinking in a different way and trying to impact certain people for like certain reasons. So in that sense, is like, as I say it, I'm like, okay, well, that's what a brand does. So yes, I do consider myself like the Babin brand is a thing now.
Yeah, it's a good answer. And what would you say to teenagers who do tend to overthink what they're posting? Like, it's very polished. You know, Finsta is the truth in many regards.
Oh, it
right?
happens all the time. You know?
Yeah.
And if something doesn't get like 100 likes within minutes, people take stuff down. Like,
Yeah.
What kind of advice?
Is that just a process you think that teens have to go through to find themselves, or do you think there's value in them actually just going for it and being more authentic in who they are, and they're actually going to really set themselves apart from other people?
So the funny thing is, I so want to say that's the answer.
Yeah.
But I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Like when I was 17 and put something up, if it didn't perform well, I was like, something's broken, take it down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. I think it's on some level, it's a process that you're going to have to go through. And it's less a process about the content you're putting out on social and more so just growing up and becoming more confident in yourself. I think it's way more of a like self-confidence conversation than it is a content conversation.
Very interesting. Self-confident and self-awareness, right?
How do you like with content creators, how I don't know if you can give them advice, but like how did you build confidence when it came to posting content on social media, like in posting like telling more of your story and posting more video online?
I think a lot of it was just growing up.
Yeah.
I guess if I'm being really honest, once things start to work and you start getting traction and you're playing at a really high level, you start caring a lot less about little things. Yeah, totally. I was at dinner with a friend yesterday, and they were like, "Do you have haters that just like will send you like hate messages?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "How do you respond to it?" And I was like, "I don't think I've ever responded to one, because for me to like switch my mindset to even have that conversation, I'm like bringing myself down, right? Like I want to play at such a high level.
Did you ever engage them? Did you ever engage trolls? Or because I found
very little.
Okay,
but I would never engage, but I had my feelings hurt way more.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, well, that sucks. Why is he being mean to me? And now I'm just like,
why is this guy being a dick?
You're a loser. So, now it's just switched up.
You troll me all the time.
Yeah. So you've learned to develop thicker skin through wisdom, maturity.
I mean, the having thick skin thing is like, oh my God, it's so critical. Because if this industry's so hard, and making an impact here and like getting traction and being able to really make this your thing, you're going to hit so many walls and so many battles. And it's like such an almost impossible task to like navigate well, that you have to be, I mean, like you can shoot me and I won't bleed. You know what I mean? Like I just like nothing will hurt my feelings at this point, because I've like gone through all of it. And so like developing thick skin and not caring about what anyone else thinks other than yourself is critical.
And it's hard though. Like, I remember when I first got into this industry, like, I started a brand prior to doing StudioPTBO. And like when you start something for the first time and you have like close friends that, look at you and they're like, what you're doing, that's not you. But like deep down inside, you're like, I genuinely feel like this is me. I feel like this, this is an extension of who I am. And when you put it out there, sometimes it becomes hard because people look at you and be like, no, that's not you.
Well, you lose people over it sometimes.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. You totally lose people over it. And it's such an interesting. Yeah. It's this whole world of content creation is just so like so weird.
It
sometimes.
It's a different life phase, and you meet different people. And again, you're a product of the 5 people you surround yourself with. And I think it's a healthy thing to meet new people through your journey. And sometimes that involves having to break up with friends, right? I don't know if you have gone through that. I mean, you've become sort of, quasi famous in your world, and I don't know if people look back and you're in your old Tallahassee. Sorry, I can't say it, man. There's too many syllables.
Legitimately, like Neil cannot pronounce names.
Yes, but people, you must find people treat you differently, or
Yeah, of course. I mean, I talk to friends I went to high school with now that it was super normal, and now it's weird, and they think I'm someone who's like made it and stuff. And in my mind, I'm always, I'm like, I'm just Tyler, guys. Like, you know, like yes, I use a camera to work, but that's it. But yeah, I mean, even, you know, if you really followed my journey in the last year and a half, the work I'm posting on my personal pages is dramatically different. I never posted a picture of myself. Yeah. Like, I never did anything like that. It was all about like the photos I was taking. And then when I turned the camera around and started talking to it, even the friends that I'm very close with now will kind of like razz me about it. And they're like, oh, you're an influencer now and all these things. Yeah. But I knew that like in my heart, that just felt like it was the next logical step. And
I love it.
And at that point, like as long as I feel right and like the thing I'm making feels right to what's going on in here, cool. Like I won, and I'm not worried about anyone else.
You're like an organic influencer. You're just espousing kindness and influencing people and inspiring people, and I think that's really cool. I got one. I know we got to wrap up, but what you are in Gary's inner circle? He seems so real. Is he who he is when we see him?
He's the realest person.
He's the realest person you've ever met.
Yeah, it's like, all so transparent, and it's exactly who he is in real life.
Yeah,
there's nothing to even else to say on it. It's the question I probably get the most, and I always say like we filmed the majority of his life 24/7, and there's no difference between him and there being a camera there.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting, yeah.
It's super unique.
Cool. Well.
Oh, are we done? Okay, well, let's wrap it up. Tallahassee one more time. I know you got it.
You can do this. Come on, Neil.
Tallahassee.
You nailed it.
This guy is the king of Tallahassee, Florida, not
what?
Yeah, I'm sorry, dude. I botched that.
So the amount of times that Neil, so we have a guy that works in our office, and the amount of times that like he pronounces last names wrong. We have a guy named Rob Viscardis in our office. He's one of our video editors, and like literally, like every time he introduces Rob, he introduces him as Rob Viscaris. Yep. Like every single time, and I keep telling him, like, listen, man, like it's Viscardis.
Cody, everyone has one weakness in life, and kryptonite, and mine is remembering.
I had to out you.
Let me ask you guys a question. This is something I've been asking a lot of people lately, because I think everyone has a unique answer. Is to you guys are obviously in the content creation space, run an agency. It's content. Why content? Why? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What about creating does it for you?
It's a great question. For me, it was always I wanted to be a writer and go into journalism. So for me, it was really early on. I grew up reading Rolling Stone magazine and wanting to work and write for Rolling Stone magazine. And I ended up going to journalism school at Ryerson, one of the best journalism schools in Canada, and ended up being a magazine editor here in Toronto for many years for multiple publications. And I just love content and telling stories. I love storytelling, and now it's morphed into other forms like video through our agency and audio through podcasts, and like the world's really your oyster now in terms of how you can tell a story and leverage it in multiple ways. And like I love this is what I love, just sitting around and hearing anecdotes and stories of growing up in Tallahassee, Florida. And
you got it.
Yes.
I'll let you answer, Cody, too.
Man, like it was like, I started a brand early on before this, kind of a lifestyle based brand, and I just wanted to help people more than anything. My background was I had a background in counseling, and I found this was a way for me to reach more people, a way for me to, help people through stories. That's part of the reason we do this podcast is really like, I genuinely you say like want to make an impact. I genuinely want to make an impact on this world. That is really why we produce content. Is like content for me is a way for me to show people that similar thing. It's like life isn't always rainbows and butterflies. Life sucks at points, but it's like it comes down to perspective. It comes down to I'm genuinely grateful when I wake up in the morning and I get to go to work, and I want people to experience that, that feeling of you know, like Gary talks about all the time, like that one life feeling. And I resonate with that. And I owe a lot to, you know, like what you guys do. You know, what Gary's doing, what you're doing, you know, guys like that have kind of set the stage for
pioneers.
Yeah, pioneers in a way that, you know, allow me to really step outside my comfort zone and do it for myself. So yeah, that's really what it comes down to for me. It's like, you know, it's producing content that resonates even with that one person, like you mentioned. Like, so I think we share the same type of ethos when it comes to that.
And that means design too, right? Content and design. Like back in the day, again, when I was magazine editor, I was, I was thinking when I was an editor, it's more words and captions and pull quotes and cover lines. And you'd work with the art director, but not that close. But to me now, content is really about both. Like content is the words, but that is just as important, right? And so I think of content as design too. I'm not sure. Like, what's your answer to that?
So my honest answer, I actually hate the word content so much because it's such a buzzword now.
Yeah, it is. Definitely.
So like, I really, if we have to figure out what the new word is.
Let's do it right now, Babin. What is the new word for content? I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but
way above my pay grade. But I think anything can be content. Like music is content, the art's content, words are content. It's the means by which you tell your story.
Okay. Yeah. So we have to come up with one word for that. But we will over time. If you can create that, Babin.
That's the real legacy.
I like the idea of storytelling. Like, you know, we talk about it all the time.
Well, our tagline is tell your story.
Like, but storytelling is like, it's just telling people's story. I think is the most effective piece. And, you know, giving, you know, like people the opportunity to, you know, like for me, not just me to speak, but for me to ask you questions, because I think through questions we discover, you know, like we discover nuggets of like information that we wouldn't discover directly through content. So that's why I love, like, you know, Gary does his Ask GaryVee. You know, people are doing, you know, question based, like where I just feel like we can gather so much more information through storytelling on social and like whatever platform you're on.
But Babin's right. 10 years ago, content really wasn't in the vernacular so much. It was more about words. Like when I was a magazine editor, content rarely was mentioned. I'm just literally.
Where did it come? Like where do we?
I think it was content marketing.
Yeah,
and that came along, and everyone got hyper obsessed with it because it works as content marketing, and then it just got stripped down to content. like this is content. That's content, and. It does, the words kind of, you're right, become sort of diluted, and something new needs to come along, but that's not up to us today. But this was great. We're super really grateful that you gave us your time in Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're flying back to New York soon?
Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m.
Okay.
It's gonna be great.
Well, enjoy the city. You know, try to get some good eats in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And thanks again, and we hope to stay in touch with you. And thank you.
Absolutely. This was a great conversation. I appreciate it, guys.
Tallahassee's finest.
Thank you for tuning into the Studio PTBO podcast. We will see you soon.